Cooking in association with Simply Good Food TV, where today we're going to make ciabatta bread. Now before we get started, take a second and click that subscribe button in YouTube and take a few minutes and download the Simply Good Food TV app. Ciabatta bread is a relatively new creation, especially for Italy, which has a deep culinary history because it was developed in the 1980s. It was primarily developed in response to French baguettes that had found their way into Italy. Now the term ciabatta actually translates into slipper, which it was named because of its flat shape. The bread also has a very porous center and a nice crisp crust. Now ciabatta can be a little bit more complex than some of the other breads I've made, primarily just because the dough can be difficult to manage because it's a little bit on the moist side. Throughout the video I actually refer to this bread as ciabatta bread when technically it's ciabatta al latte because it uses a tiny bit of milk. But at any rate, let's take a look at the ingredients so we can get started on making this bread. Let's take a real quick look at the ingredients for our ciabatta bread. We have 3 3/4 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour, 1 cup plus 3 tablespoons of a lukewarm water, and we've got 1/3 cup of warm milk, and in that I've dissolved 1 teaspoon of the instant yeast. We've got 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 1 tablespoon of salt, and we're going to use 2 cups of our biga or Polish, and what this is an overnight starter. Now this overnight starter was made from 1/4 teaspoon of active yeast, not the instant yeast, but the active yeast, 1 cup of warm water, and 2 1/3 cup of flour. Just cover it with plastic, put it in the corner, let it set for at least 24 hours. If you go 36 or 48, that's fine as well. So we're going to use 2 cups of this. So I've got my yeast in my milk, and it has been soaking for about 10 minutes. So, really it's about getting your yeast to bloom. So we're going to dump that over here in our KitchenAid mixer. Now, I want to make sure I get all that yeast. So I'm just going to kind of take my water and just rinse it all in there. So there we go. Now, you've seen in my previous video as well, I like to make sure that my salt is distributed throughout my flour. So we're just going to kind of mix it together a little bit, nothing fancy, nothing big. Now we do need to use 2 cups of our starter here, of our biga or Polish. Let me kind of move things around a little bit. I had to write ciabatta bread starter on top of this because I'm actually making a couple different types of bread. Now with this ciabatta bread, what we're going to do with it, or what I'm going to do with it, is make it about the size of a sandwich loaf, because tomorrow my kids are all coming over, my grandkids, and we're going to do Italian style subs. So I'm making a couple different kinds of bread so we can make those subs. So I'm just going to take my biga. Now this recipe on the biga makes about 2 cups. Once you get all that mixed together, you're going to have maybe a little bit more than 2 cups. What we kind of want to do, so I'm not going to worry about measuring it. We want to kind of put this in chunks in our water. Nothing scientific. Just kind of try to break it up as you put it in. By letting this rest overnight, it starts to get almost a sour smell to it, almost like a sourdough. Not as intense, but not bad, pretty close. So let's go ahead and we're going to put our paddle on, put that on low, because we kind of want that all to get broke up within our mixer. And while that's mixing, I'm going to go ahead and dump in my 1 tablespoon of olive oil. So my mixer has been going now for just a couple minutes. You'll see that the biga is pretty much all mixed together. We kind of have like a soupy mix. But what I'm going to do now is take my flour and slowly pour that into the mixer. Alright, got all of our flour in the mixer, at least 99% of it. You can see I missed a little bit. That's not going to be enough to concern us. We're going to let the paddle do its work here. You can hear it slowing down. We might need to add a little bit of flour to this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my mixer off, clean up this paddle, throw the dough hook on, let the dough hook work its magic, lock it in, see if this will come together.
I'm gonna stop this real quick and just check my dough real quick to see how I think it's gonna be all right. And you know, I think it is. There are some chunks of flour in there still. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to turn my mixer on medium for 2 minutes. And let it knead this dough. After 2 minutes, I'm going to turn it down to low and let it knead for another 2 minutes. It has been 2 minutes since our medium, and that is going to be just a little bit too moist. We're going to have to add just a tiny little bit of flour to that. I'm not going to add a lot. This is a 3/4 scoop, and I'm by no means putting this all in there. I'm going to start with maybe a half a cup of flour. I think that's going to give me the consistency that I want. Now I am going to let this go on medium for another 2 minutes. It has been 2 minutes on medium. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to set this to low. By the way, the flour that we added, perfect amount. It's very velvety. It's not quite as moist as it was. We're going to let this go for another 2 minutes on low. Now it's been 2 minutes. Let's take a look at our dough. Still just a tad on the wet side. We're going to go with it and see what happens. This might be fun. What we're going to do, the goal is to not to add a lot of flour to this dough, but it's a wet one, so we're going to have to put down a good bed of flour to work with. Get my other hand here. Nice and floured up. Let's see what we got here. Now we're not going to work this a lot with our hands. We just want to make sure that that the mixer brought everything together like it should have, which I feeling like it did. It's going to be a real velvety, real moist, velvety dough. Wow, look at that. So let's see if we can work this. Not very much. Yeah, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. You can see here, it's a real velvety, very, very velvety dough. And I'm trying to be very mindful to not add any additional flour to it as I'm kneading it. And as you can see, I'm just kind of stretching it and pulling it back on itself. If I do this kind of slower, just like that, this doesn't need any more work. Now I do have a bowl that I've oiled up here. Kind of just used a tiny little bit of olive oil so it wouldn't stick. We're going to put that in there. We're going to cover it with plastic. And then we are going to let this set for 1 hour and 15 minutes for the first rise. It has been 1 hour and 15 minutes. You can see our ciabatta bread, or our ciabatta dough at this point, has risen, pretty much doubled in size. Woo! I love that smell coming out of the bread. What we're going to do, our goal is going to be to cut this into 4 equal parts. We've got to put down a little bed of flour here because this dough is a little wet. You can hear the kitty. Every time I hit play or record on the camera, the cat decides it's time to go out and meows accordingly. Meow! So, let me push that flour out of the way. I'm going to use my little handy dandy scraper. Try as good as I possibly can to cut this into 4 equal pieces. This is not an exact science. There will not be a test. And I am failing miserably at this. Alright, so now, I've got it in 4 equal pieces, one of which has decided to stick to the counter. Gotta love this. Alright, well anyway, what I'm going to do now, this is good. Oh my. To put a little bit of this, since this is such a wet dough, I do have to put some flour down on my parchment paper here. Get a bit of flour on my hands. Now all we want to do is kind of make a cylinder with this. So kind of try to make a little, just make a little rectangle, kind of make it look almost like a bun. You want to try to get it as even as possible. And we're going to just kind of pat that down. I didn't do a very good job getting this one very even. That's okay. That gives it character. We'll call it character. That's about how we want it. You don't want it very thick in the middle, because when we bake this bread, the ciabatta will puff up in the oven. Alright, so we got one done. Great thing about working with dough, if first you don't succeed, try and try again. This is going to be alright. I just got to stretch it out. I'm trying to get in a hurry. I'm getting in a hurry, and you cannot do that when you're working with bread. I need a little larger rectangle here so that I can fold it in and make a nice little loaf like that. Try to shape it all nice and even, nice and smooth. I'm going to do 2 on each of my parchment paper. All right, so press this out into a large rectangle. Try to spread it out, and I'm telling you, this ciabatta bread, I did make it one other time, and it's going to make an absolutely awesome sandwich. Ciabatta bread, you know, it's got the nice open airiness kind of to it. It's got just enough of a chew. Kind of spread that out a little bit, but it will make awesome sandwiches, and I know that because I've done it. So we're going to cover our 4 loaves of ciabatta bread with a damp towel. We're going to let those rise for somewhere between 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Now, half an hour before that rise is done, we're going to turn our oven on to 425. Now, I do have my baking stone in the oven because I want that to heat up along with the oven itself. So here, about 1.5 hours, 2 hours, we'll finish this bread. The second rise on our ciabatta bread is done. I did go ahead and kind of cut my parchment paper because they were starting to stick together when they were kind of spreading out, but that's okay. I'm going to put up a picture of the setup of my oven. You'll see that there on the top shelf I have my baking stone, and then on the lower shelf there, kind of off to the side, I have a 1/4 baking sheet. Once I get the loaves onto my baking stone, I'll put a 1/2 cup of water down on that baking sheet and quickly close the oven. That's going to create some steam to kind of set the crust on these loaves. Now 5 minutes later, I'll once again put in a little bit of water, probably about a 1/4 cup this time, and quickly close the oven so we get a second layer of steam. These loaves are going to bake 20 to 25 minutes total time. Don't forget, twice with water in the first 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and get these in the oven, and then we're going to see what these turn out like. I just checked the ciabatta bread. I did have to put a few more minutes on the oven, but it looks incredible. I'm going to quickly grab it out of the oven while the cat entertains you by meowing again. Every time I hit record, he runs to the door and starts meowing. All right, I'm going to grab my pizza peel. I'm going to get a few of these ciabatta bread loaves out. They look incredible. Oh my gosh. Oh, there's number 1. You can see the bread just kind of, or the bread, the paper just pulls away real quick. They're lightly brown and completely beautiful. And really, really hot. I am going to let these things cool. Oh, this is the part about bacon that I love. You get it out of the oven, it's hot, and you get your fingers burnt. But then you get to smell these wonderful loaves. Can't wait. Stick with us. 5 minutes, when these cools down, we will give them a try. My ciabatta bread has cooled just enough. I like to leave it a little bit warm because, you know, I want it to melt that butter. So what I'm going to do, if I can do this without burning myself too much, is now when you cut this bread, let your knife do the work. Don't push down on it. We're going to save this tomorrow for a nice sandwich. So we'll cut this little piece right here. My wife is sitting just off camera. She, like me, is a bread lover. So I'm going to cut 2 little pieces here. Now you can see now the ciabatta bread didn't have quite the holes that I would like to have seen. I really like a real open ciabatta bread. But you know what? That's okay. It's about the flavor. Let's give this a try. Put a little smear of butter on both of these. One for me, one for the beautiful wife. Got a nice crust on it. Let's see what...
It's good.
More butter. Just absolutely incredible bread. Fun to make. Cannot wait for the wife to try this. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google+. Most importantly, click that subscribe button in YouTube and download that Simply Good Food TV app. Thanks for watching, and ciao.